Welcome to Something for the Turbo, the new weekly podcast brought to you by Unfound, the global platform for the travel-loving cyclist. Welcome to another episode of the Something for the Turbo podcast. We hope wherever you are in the world that you are well and you are enjoying these conversations. We really appreciate all the support and comments and emails that we've been receiving from you all, so thank you very much for that. If you haven't yet though, please do subscribe to the podcast, and if you fancy it, leave us a review. And please, please, please tell all your cycling friends, spread the word. Please do help us pass the pod. Anyway, how on earth do I introduce today's guest? I'm delighted to be joined by Emma Pooley. She has 10 Olympic, World and Commonwealth medals to her name, including becoming the World Individual Time Trial Champion in 2010. She won 6 World Cup victories, has 7 stage race victories to her name, not to mention a host of tri and duathlon wins as well. Not bad for someone who considers themselves a runner at heart. She also has a PhD in geotechnical engineering, having previously graduated from the University of Cambridge with first-class degree in engineering. She managed all her studies while racing, and now she's recently discovered the joys of off-road cycling and bike packing, which she now combines with running, swimming, bouldering, and riding on the road. She's currently working for the Swiss Cycling Federation, running their Faster and Female program. She's just broken the world record for Everesting for women, and she is the creator of the amazing Pocket Porridge snacks. We discuss all of this and lots more. So sit back and enjoy the conversation, and let me bring you Emma. Emma, thank you very much for joining us. How are you?
I'm okay, thanks. Yeah, thanks for having me. And
Tired?
my cat, yeah, but I've also got my cat with me. She insists on coming to sit on my lap whenever I'm on an important call, so she's come to join in. So if you hear a purring noise, that's not me, it's the cat.
Very good. Well, I'm glad you consider this an important call. What's her name?
Bella.
Bella. Hello, Bella. Hello, Bella. Well, as if we didn't have enough to talk about this week, you've gone and broken a world record.
yeah, that was kind of fun. Yeah, that was, and it was a bit of a spontaneous decision to have a go at it, and it was really fun. I'm really glad I did. I've kind of, the Everesting thing, I've kind of resisted it for a few years, especially because I was sort of observed an Everesting when I was at GCN when Ollie did it for a video, and it was a bit theatrical and over the top. I didn't really want to buy in. And then I think recently with there's been some really good female riders who've had a crack at it, and it was just it's exactly what I like doing, which is vertical. And so I thought, okay, like, don't see it as an exercise in a mental challenge of doing the same climb over and over again. And so I decided quite spontaneously last week with a friend, he wanted to do a sort of some kind of cycling challenge, and yeah, we didn't research. We made a few mistakes in the planning, let's put it that way. But yeah, we had a go, and it was quite fun. And I did get the record, but I wasn't sure I'd make it at some point.
Well, we had Hannah on a few weeks ago.
Yeah.
And her effort was staggering as well, but you've got to nudge that a little bit further. I think with regards to the Everesting thing, I think that's been one of the nice things about lockdown is that it's something that everyone can go and do. In fact, the whole concept of Everest isn't really about the speed or how quickly you do it. It's more inclusive than that. And it's been quite nice to see amazing athletes go and get a little bit quicker and quicker each time. How was it for you? Have you got any good stories for us?
Yeah, a few. Yeah, I have to say that Hannah's ride was really inspired me to do it, because she broke the record by so much, and I kind of looked her up and thought, who is this? Like, I have to confess, I don't really follow women. Well, I don't follow any racing that much. But, I'm more involved on the participation side of cycling nowadays, and road racing. And I thought, well, she must be at least on the British team. And I looked her up, and then I could have exchanged a few messages with her on Instagram, and I'm really impressed by her. And like, she's clearly just an incredible athlete. And having thought about doing it myself, I knew that there's a lot of, you have to plan it quite well. And so I was by no means, I didn't think I would break her record, but I had a different approach to it from her. So I had thought about it before, and I think that if you want to do fast Everesting, I need to find a steep climb, because if you maximize the energy that goes into moving upwards and you minimize the energy you lose in aero drag. So I know that I'm better on steep climbs. Obviously there's a sweet spot, so if you go too steep, you don't move forwards anymore. And so a friend and I found a steep climb not too far from home, because I live in Switzerland. It's kind of easy to find long steep climbs. And also, the longer the climb, the more recovery you get, because if it's really short, you barely get any recovery. So I found this climb that was 13.5% for basically sort of 890 meters. Got a few extra meters at the top and the bottom. But what I hadn't really reckoned on was that I thought it was going to be a warmish day, but it was actually quite a hot day. And it was south facing, and there was no wind, and there's no shade on this climb, and it was just brutally hot. And I wished I'd started at 3 a.m, because it was grim. And it was just, the heat was unbearable, and I planned to do it unsupported, so I had all my bottles prepared. I had a bottle for each lap labeled with numbers. I like to keep things tidy, and on each bottle I had a gel and a bar taped to the bottle, so I could just, I put them on a little table by the car, sort of a few hundred meters above the bottom of the climb. So I just rode up to the car, unclipped, grabbed a bottle, chucked the old bottle in a cardboard box, and carried on. So I didn't really lose much time. But one bottle after 3 hours wasn't enough for a 53-minute lap, and I found a tap near the top. But then you had to stop, get off the bike, put the bike down, turn the tap on, get back on the bike, and you lose nearly a minute each time there, and that was a big mistake. Weather, like I wish I'd done it on a cool day.
Yeah, that's interesting. Hannah said exactly the same, actually,
Yeah.
in terms of the heat. And knowing her and having chatted to her a couple of weeks ago, I think she will not mind that you taking the baton on from her, and I'm sure she'll be back to give it another crack in the next month or two.
Yeah, I reckon she. Yeah, I'm absolutely sure someone will break it soon, and I wouldn't claim it's it's nowhere near the best that a woman can do, and I look forward to it. Like you said about everything, I think it's really a personal challenge, and it's really, I think it's about taking yourself to your limits and kind of committing yourself to a struggle. And at a certain point you don't really give a shit how fast you go, you just want it to be over. And it's when you get to that dark place in a ride like that, whether it's an Everesting or whether it's your first 100k ride or your first 100 miles ride, I think that's the good thing about it is it's a personal challenge, and I think everyone who does it deserves real respect and kudos, and that's the whole point of it. So yeah, I'm not fussed that someone is going to break it soon. I'm glad I finished it, but I could not have pedaled another meter, I think.
You were done, were you?
Completely spent. I was so done. There's a restaurant at the top of the climb that I did, and so I went past it 9 times, and I didn't carry money or a phone, mostly because I didn't want the extra weight. It sounds crazy, but and on the last lap I'm going to stop and get an ice cream when I finish, and I basically crawled into this restaurant, and I was caked in salt, and the lady looked at me and she's like, "Oh, you look a bit tired." And I sat on the ground, and I got a Solero and sat on the ground. And I was a bit sort of almost hysterical, and I said, "Yeah, I'm tired because I've just done this climb 10 times." And she said, "Yeah, I know, I've been watching you all day." She's like, "What kind of idiot are you?" She was so lovely, and sold me an ice cream. I was very happy to have an ice cream.
I bet you were. And did I see you stopped in at a fast food place as well? Is that correct?
I'm not on the ride. No, I stopped
afterwards.
Yeah, it's not that I really don't like McDonald's, but. So I've been, I left home at 5:30 in the morning, drove there, and we had a coffee, and then we did the ride, and a friend came out in the afternoon to support. She rode there and stood in the sun for 5 hours to hand me bottles at the bottom, so just to make it a tiny bit quicker, and also just for a bit of moral support, a friendly, happy face, and so she was totally cooked. I mean, it's exhausting hanging around in the heat. So we were driving back together. Poor thing, she was still in her cycling kit, and I'd put at least some clean clothes on, and there was a massive traffic jam as we were going to get onto the motorway, and oh no. And she said, "I think we should go to McDonald's. You need McDonald's." And I said, "Oh, I don't really like McDonald's. I'll get a smoothie from the supermarket next door." And we went to the McDonald's, and I haven't been in one for 20 years, and they have touchscreens now. Like, the last time I went to McDonald's, there wasn't such a thing as a touchscreen. And so she showed me how to order with the touchscreen, and so I got some fries, and I put extra salt on the fries, and I wasn't hungry, I felt sick, but at that point you just need anything. I think I was more hungry yesterday afterwards, but yeah. So the McDonald's thing, everyone thinks is really funny, and like some kind of guilt trip. Like, I don't think there's anything wrong with getting chips. It's just that it's not the kind of food I'm into, and like people who think I only did an Everesting to go to McDonald's. No way. Like, I'd rather eat a falafel wrap any day. But it was just like when I heard this great quote from a nutritionist on a ultra running podcast that you're better off eating the junk food you have with you right there when you need it than waiting for 5 hours or 3 hours or even 2 hours for the perfect meal that you want. And I think as athletes, we have amateur and professional, you have a way of getting really fussy about food and really centered on it, and of course it's really important to eat good quality food, but there are points when you just need calories, and it's better to have McDonald's that is right there and avoid the traffic jam, go home and make the perfect salad and not eat it till 10 p.m.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, get those calories in. Get those calories in. Oh, very good. Well, massive congratulations on that. Why don't we go back a little bit, because you've got quite an interesting story, and you've done so much that your incredibly successful pro cycling career is almost just a sort of chapter in everything else that's been going on. So, given you probably describe yourself as a runner, don't you, originally?
Yeah, I think I'm always going to be a runner at heart. I'm not a very good runner, but in my heart, I'm a runner, definitely. And I only got into cycling when I was in my 20s. I was a student at Cambridge, and running was I'll be honest, was my life. So obviously I was studying, but I wasn't, studying isn't always very interesting. And my kind of stress relief and my social life was all in the running club, the cross-country running club. But I ran too much. I probably didn't eat enough calcium and vitamin D, and I ended up with a stress fracture, and I wasn't allowed to run for 6 weeks, which was torment, and I didn't really know what to do with myself. So I borrowed a bike of a friend, and I thought I'll just use it as cross training. And then I did a few, like the university cycling club, I did a few group rides and did a few time trials, and then thought, I don't know, I'll give triathlon a go. Like, triathlon's super cool, and you get to wear sunglasses day and night, and I could swim ish. So I thought, how hard can it be? I can run, I can swim. Cycling's not that difficult. So I started doing triathlon. So I was a triathlete before I was a cyclist, which horrifies a lot of people, but never mind. And then I started doing the chain gang in Cambridge, and anyone who lives in the UK knows what a chain gang is. But for other people, a chain gang is like a really fast paceline group ride. So a smallish group, and you rotate through and off the whole time, and no one waits. So it is a drop ride, so to speak. So they're actually trying to drop people. It's almost like the break in a road race. And I started doing that as training, and really enjoyed the challenge. And I think the first time I made it around the Cambridge chain gang, I was just so chuffed. Like, it was such a big achievement, because I mean they were mostly guys, and it didn't matter. Like, everyone had to try and hang on, and that was really fun. And then a friend persuaded me to go to a road race, and then I did a road race, and I did nationals, and so that was when I was 22, and that was my first season. That was in 2005, and I did basically a couple of road races, then the nationals, and then
right. And is that your first one?
In 2005, yeah, and then I came fourth at nationals just through ignorance and stubbornness, really. Like, the break went, and all I knew was that from the chain gang, you just got to hang on. So I didn't know that Nicole Cook was Nicole Cook, and I didn't know that Rachel Heel was Rachel Heel, and I didn't know who all these pro riders were. So I just hung on, and we ended up with a break of 5 people, and just ignorance and stubbornness, basically. So I got to the end, and I think I was last in the sprint, but that was my tradition. That was always my space in the sprint. So and that got me kind of noticed, and that's what got me started. But that makes it sound like it was really easy. I had a team in 2006, but it's not easy. I mean, anyone who races in road racing knows it's not simple. Like, there's just so much to learn, and I didn't realize then how much I still had to learn. So if I'd known, I don't think I'd have bothered. It was a hard learning process. And so after that summer, I'd finished at Cambridge, and I moved straight to Switzerland to do a PhD. So I had all that thing about moving countries. Is the cycling in Switzerland's amazing, but it took me a while to find a group of people to train with, because that's really important to me, to train with other people. And then I was racing in Belgium in 2006 for a team based in Belgium, and so I was getting the overnight train from work on a Friday night and racing Saturday, Sunday, and then the overnight train back and going straight to work on Monday. And I'll be honest, it was terrible. I couldn't do it. And Belgian racing is not my thing. Big bunches, and I don't have the peloton skills, and I certainly didn't then. And I just hated it. Like, I could never get to the front of the bunch because there was never a hill, and it was miserable. So I quit, and I went back to doing some triathlon and some running, and really, and working, because I had a full-time job as a researcher then for the PhD. And sorry, I'm going on and on about it. But then I ended up going to Australia in the winter, so around Christmas 2006. I've got a family in Perth, and we had a family holiday, and my PhD supervisor said, "Oh, there's a centrifuge in Perth in the geotechnical department. You could do some research there." And she's a triathlete, and so she knows that I love cycling, and so she kind of gave me a bit of a nudge and said, "Take your bike." And so I did, and I took my bike, and I ended up doing lots of riding there on group rides. Exactly what I was describing before, like the fast group rides in the morning. Only this time it was even better, because it was early morning, and then you'd have an amazing coffee stop, because they make great coffee in Australia. And there were all these grouchy guys who didn't much like a small female turning up and hanging onto their back wheel on the rides. And that's where I learned to ride in the wind, and it's where I learned that you should always pull a turn, because it makes you stronger. And I hate going on those bunch rides and sitting at the back and not working. Like, I think if there's a bunch ride and it's rolling, you should do your turn. I'd rather do a few turns and get dropped and that got me back into it. And I just did so much riding that that summer, well, it was a winter for Europe, but an Australian summer, that I came back to Europe really, really strong, and I found a Swiss team, a local team, and we did hilly races, and there were smaller bunches. So it was really different from Belgium. And this small team was run, all by volunteers. No one was getting paid at all, but it gave me all the opportunities I needed, and they were really supportive. And and then I got properly into it, and that was in 2007. So it wasn't like it was easy at all. There were lots of crashes and lots of quittings and lots of, I hate this, why am I bothering? Before I really got into racing in 2007.
Yeah, and it's obviously I then had a tremendous success, culminating with obviously the World Championships and 2008 at Beijing. But do you feel that your racing career is, how do you look back on it? Because are you happy since you retired, or did you find retiring very difficult? How did you manage that?
I'm really grateful for the experiences and the opportunities I had racing, and I think I was really lucky to come to it later. So I was unlucky in many ways, in some ways, because I didn't have the skills. So it was a real advantage to learn to ride as a kid and learn all the skills. And I'm a bit of a chicken, so I still can't do a wheelie or a track stand even. And it's partly because I'm a bit of a chicken and I'm not very well coordinated and my balance is shit. But also I'm quite short, and my bikes were always a little bit too big for me. That's just because you have to race on 700c wheels in road races, so you can get a spare wheel, and so it's really hard to do those. The bike is just inherently less stable with a shorter stem, and when you're stretched out on it. And so I wish I learned to ride as a kid for that reason. But on the other hand, I came to it with a freshness and a kind of an excitement, and anything is really fun when you're improving. And I think that's the same for anyone. It doesn't matter whether you're trying to improve from domestique to world champion, or whether you're trying to improve from a 50k ride to a 100k ride, or like flat riding to climbing. It doesn't really matter. I think the fun is in the challenging yourself and improving. And so that was a real advantage, because I came to it in my early 20s and I was still improving up to 2010-11, and then 2010 I had a really good year. And I mean, and the whole time I was racing, then I was still working at the university in Zurich, still on this research project. But I was allowed to go part-time again. My PhD professor, she was really supportive, and at the height of my racing, I was only working, I think, 40%, and I'd do most of that in the winter. So I had a lot of flexibility, but it still wasn't easy. And
it's a hard life, and particularly for women cycling. I mean, I think it's come a long way since you finished, but how that frustration around the gap between the men and the women's race. I've heard you say before about not having the opportunity to race at Tour de France. It still seems crazy that there isn't a women's Tour de France. Like, where are you at in terms of your views on the sport and how we can, where it needs to go, and
that's a good question.
How's it developed since you left it?
Well, it's moving in the right direction, let's say. So I try to be like, look at the positives these days, because I think, so look, just as a starting point, like, I think nothing changes, there are never any positive changes unless someone tries to make them. And I wasn't the first one to call for more and better women's racing and coverage of racing and better, basically, rights for women in cycling. I was not the first, and I was not particularly revolutionary, but I tried to use the voice I had when I was racing, when I was winning races, let's say, to try to make the point that it is one of the most sexist sports still out there. I mean, I'm talking about pro road racing. Mountain biking is better because women and men race on the same course and they have roughly the same amount of coverage. There's just this, in road cycling, there's this tradition of the old races, which are kind of worshipped by most cycling fans. And that's cool. I think it's good to appreciate the tradition of the sport. But you have to also look at that sport and say, where are the women? Like, the only women you see in the history of cycling are podium girls. And doesn't anyone else feel uncomfortable about that? But when I say that to someone from ASO or from the UCI, they think I'm just like some kind of radical man-eating feminist. And I'm proud to be a feminist, but I've got nothing against men's sport. It's just I don't see how they can consider it a complete sport without the women's sport there. And you wouldn't. I mean, I can't think of any other sports that are quite that bad. Maybe sumo wrestling. I mean, boxing and football, they've all got basically the same events for women, and the same, good levels of publicity, and they're improving. And I just think we wouldn't countenance a London Marathon or a New York Marathon or Ironman Kona without a women's race of the same distance on the same day. Like, in cycling, it's like the London Marathon said, nah, women can't run a marathon. We'll give you a 10K the day before, And that's what marathon running was like in the 50s. But we've moved on.
Yeah.
And the reason,
I know, it's so strange because I think you can still, I mean, that nostalgia about the history of the sport, you can still have that and then try and move the sport forward on an equal basis. And
then people always come back to me with things like, oh, distance and prize money, and they think it's all about the money, and then they come back with like, oh, can women do the distance? And then some of the female racers say, oh, we don't want to race 250k, and then people say, oh, we don't want to be like the men's sport is full of problems as well, and dominated by the Tour de France. And that's all true. That's all true. And I'm not trying to say let's make women's cycling into men's cycling, or because at the moment it would destroy women's cycling to regulate for the same salaries, because a lot of teams wouldn't be able to pay them, and you couldn't just copy paste the men's calendar, because there are women's races that are really good races and have a history and also need to be adapted. But the point is more where should we be heading? Like, it shouldn't be two separate sports, and if it is, the UCI should represent it separately.
But don't you think the men's sport is a bit rudderless as well at the moment?
Yes.
It's probably why it's been so detrimental to the women's sport. And the frustration from a marketing perspective, the women's racing is so exciting as well from a spectator perspective, which makes it even more frustrating.
Yeah, I think it's. I mean, there's a few things in cycling. One, there's the tradition and the history, which is the people who run the sport are, in the main part, they're ex-riders, and they know what they know. But I don't personally believe most of them have a perspective on the wider purpose of sport and society. Like, they're obsessed with winning races, and as a pro cyclist, of course, it's your job to win a race, but that's not the point actually of pro sport. Like, actually, it doesn't matter who wins the bit of metal on a piece of string, or the funny shaped cup on attached to a piece of stone. Like, it's absolutely pointless. The whole point of pro sport, if there is one, is for people to watch it and be entertained or inspired to do sport themselves. And so, like, the media coverage has got to go hand in hand with the racing. And the sad thing about women's racing, which is improving, but it still upsets me a bit, is that there are so many amazing races that don't get seen. And and it's sad, because the racing is so exciting to watch and it's so inspirational. And that's, the few races that I did that had decent TV coverage, like the Olympics and Worlds. After the Olympics in London, I got all these messages from people saying, "Oh, it was so inspiring, and my daughter wanted to take up cycling," and it made me realize that was the point. Like, that is the point. And of course, your job as a rider is to try and win stuff, but I don't think it should be at all costs. And I think you've got to keep in mind that at the end of the day, like, pro cycling is very, very niche in terms of the point of the sport. Like, the main point is for transport, and free time and leisure and health. And pro sport isn't there for the pros. Actually, it's there for it should be there for society as a whole. But it's very hard for the female pros to make a living out of it at the moment, because most of them don't get paid enough to live off, and that won't change until there's better media coverage. And cycling, of course, making a decent video highlights package or live coverage of races is extremely expensive. You need helicopters, you need motorbikes, you need drones, you need a studio cutting the whole lot, and that's really expensive. It's not comparable to, say, tennis, where it's relatively it's not so expensive to film a tennis match, and therefore, once you've got the media coverage, female tennis players went on strike, as we know, to get equal prize money to the men. It wouldn't really work in women's cycling, because if you don't have media coverage, who's going to notice that you've gone on strike? So
true.
Yeah, and I'm convinced. Sorry, before I sound like I end on like talk about that on a really negative note, I just think, like, the women's racing that there is really good and really high standard, and the standards really improving year on year. And when there is coverage, it's really exciting to watch. And I think that eventually the demand will come, and it'll come from fans of cycling who want to see women's racing. And then it'll come from the sponsors of races who'll say to the Tour de France, "Look, this is an embarrassment to us that you don't have a women's race. You're making us look like old-fashioned sexist dinosaurs. Like, if you don't have a women's race, we'll pull out of sponsoring the Tour de France." And then they'll realise, because in the end, it's money that talks.
Yeah, agreed. And maybe one of the shifts that we're starting to see in the sport might help that as well. And that's just the diversification of cycling, with riders like Mathieu van der Poel, and just looking at different disciplines and gravel. I know you've been doing a lot of bike packing recently, and just trying to knock down this kind of old school tribal sort of approach, and make it more holistic and approachable for everyone.
Exactly. I think I'm really enjoying my sort of adventure bike, I call it. It's basically a cross bike with really, really chunky tires, and it allows me to go everywhere. And it's like this sort of a sort of crossbreed between a mountain bike and a road bike. And I think that a lot of people are attracted to that kind of cycling, because you don't have to commit to a tribe. You don't have to sign up to be a roadie or a mountain biker, and it's just cycling. And I like the fact that I'd like just cycling to be seems a continuum, and like you say, diversify. And there's more and more. There are more events they're effectively races. Let's face it, like the Oak Route and other sportives and the bike packing stuff, but they're not regulated by the UCI, and that gives amateur cyclists and ex-pro cyclists, men and women, the chance to do something really challenging and fun and exciting that isn't, where there's no rules saying that women can only race so far, and there's also no prize money. It's all totally amateur, but I think that's great. Like, I didn't start racing to win prize money. I started racing because I enjoyed it, and I wanted to get better at it. And and I think that gives a real opportunity for women going to the sport to challenge themselves and you know, like most sport teams, I think all of them, the women do the same distance as the men. It's not a problem. I mean, it's just, you know, you just do the ride, and that, you know, maybe it'll trickle upwards, I hope so, into pro sport. But and you know, like I was saying earlier, the pro sport's a tiny corner of cycling, so it shouldn't matter, but it does, because it's used as the I don't even know the word in German, Aushängeschild, so it flies the flag for cycling, you know, the pro sport. And so when you don't see women racing the same race as men, there's just so little women cycling on television. Like, where are the female role models? They're there, like there are brilliant female cyclists, and yet they're not there to be seen, and that a bit upsets me. So
yeah, well, I mean, as I said, hopefully social media and podcasts, and you know, hopefully if there is a push to change the tide, that can help things. And I do think that, to your point you mentioned earlier, having idols and inspirations for younger cyclists to aim towards, it's that kind of, to look at a rugby analogy, I've mentioned this before, it's you know, in New Zealand they put all the budget into making sure the elite men and women perform at the best, so they become idols, and that grows the sport. And that's why I think it's so important to have inspirational women achieving great things that are visible for like my two daughters and many other sort of young girls coming through.
It's funny, because there was a point in my cycling career when I was a bit kind of disillusioned, well, very disillusioned, and I didn't really see the point. Like, it wasn't getting very well paid, if at all, and I found the bunch really stressful, and I just thought, why am I doing this? Like, I could go back to working 100% and have a regular job and go running in the morning and go cycling on weekends and not have all this stress. And someone said to me, oh no, the point is that you're inspirational. And I thought, no, I'm not inspirational. Like, whatever, you know, it's very kind of them, but rubbish. And I remember that when I was a kid, my idols were Paul Redcliffe and Kelly Holmes, and really, like, hero worship. And it really did inspire me. Like, I think, you know, it's not the reason I run anymore. It's not the only reason, but, you know, that's what got me into it. And it wasn't just that they were fast, it was how they came across and how they raced. And so I thought, well, yeah, I might not be the most inspirational, but I can see what the point is.
Yeah, no, exactly. And let's obviously, I don't want to sort of diminish your racing career, because you had such wonderful successes, but what have you been doing more recently, and what have you been doing since you finished racing on the road? Because I think that's as much as about you than your racing career. You're not simply defined by your racing career, is what I'm trying to say.
No, it was a period of my life, and yeah, there were some tough times and some really good times, and so it'll always mark me, I guess, those years. And I think that some of the friends you make in races like that, the friends and the memories that stay with you. But it was only a brief period. Like, as I said, I didn't grow up a cyclist, and I'd like to not be defined by having, you know, won a few races once long ago. And so when I stopped cycling, when I like sort of officially retired in 2014 after the Commonwealth Games, I knew that I wanted to keep racing, but I wanted to keep racing in triathlon, long distance triathlon, because I saw there a sport that actually suited my physiology better. So I kept running in the winters, and I'm not a great runner, but I'm good enough, especially when it's hilly and long. And I'm not the best time trialist, but I'm kind of good enough when it's hilly and long. So I went and targeted a lot of the long distance triathlon races. And to a pro cyclist, or someone who's into pro cycling, that sounds like a total step down. But I made more money in 2015 from prize money from triathlon than I ever did in cycling in 1 year. And I didn't win an Ironman. Like, I think I did some Ironman races, but I was crap at them because they were quite flat. But I did races that cyclists might not have heard of, like Embrunman in the French Alps and Alpe d'Huez triathlon. And, you know, I wasn't like rolling in money, but I made enough to be, I was a professional athlete properly. By then I'd finished my PhD. It was one of the few years when I was actually a full-time athlete in 2015, and I had a really good time because there wasn't all the stress of the peloton, and I really enjoyed running, as I said, and I was training loads. Unfortunately, I also got massively overtrained, I think, in that 1 year. I did too many races, I did too much training, and I had a coach who encouraged me to do low-carb training, which is a disaster for me physiologically. I ended up just a broken wreck by the end of the year. And then in 2016 I tried to go back to road racing for the Rio Olympics, and I did go back to it, and I just never quite got up to the level I needed to be at. And that was a really, really hard year, because it's so depressing to compare yourself to before, and the public criticism, not just criticism, but the public kind of almost like abuse on Twitter and things were really unnecessarily harsh. Like, you don't need, you know, I mean, it's only sport. Like, you don't need to be abusive to someone on Twitter because they didn't win a bike race. And anyway, that was a tough year. But then I did another year of like multi-sport racing. So I did duathlon and triathlon, and I won there's a duathlon world championships, the long distance one. It's in Switzerland, and I won that 4 times, I think. That was probably my best event, in that it perfectly suited my physiology. There was a 30k run and then a 150k bike and a 10k run, and it was all quite hilly, and so that was kind of the race I was best at, probably. And then, but
my worst nightmare.
it's great. If it's bad weather, it's tough, but yeah. The funny thing is that race every year, because the run is so hilly, it really wrecks your legs, and I wouldn't be able to sit on the toilet like freely for about 3 days. So I'd have to like hold onto the sink or a handle to lower myself into the toilet, because my legs are so broken. And
So sore, yeah.
It's incredible what you can do to yourself when you're pushing yourself like that in the zone. But I know it wasn't just me. I think everyone who did Zofingen, if anyone's listening who's done Zofingen, they feel my pain. They know what it was like.
Yeah. It's like a knowing look, yeah.
Yeah. So it was a really fun time, the long distance triathlon years. But again, like, all things all good things come to an end, and I didn't ever want to stay a pro athlete forever, because it's fun, but it's also, for me, it was a little bit directionless, I guess you could say. Maybe a bit, yeah. I felt too egotistical, and I'm obviously I'm quite selfish. I like my sport, but I didn't want to do just that with my life. So yeah, that came to an end of 2017, and then I worked at GCN for a year. That seemed like an interesting transition to a career in cycling that wasn't racing, and that was a tough year as well for various reasons. But it was just a year. It was a lot of travel, because they're based in the UK and I'm based in Switzerland, so that was already a bit exhausting. And it was a good year for learning about how the media works. And and
the bike media as well, I suppose.
Yeah, but more just social media, to be honest. Yeah, I mean, we didn't have much to do with the agency, so, but yeah, I never wanted to be on Instagram or Twitter or all those things, but you have to these days, really.
Yeah.
And also, yeah, plenty of good times, but I found it stressful. Like GCN, all the videos look like really fun, and just people messing around with a video recorder and making cool films or videos, but actually it's hard work. So
yeah, I can well imagine.
Yeah, and I want to just spend more time at home. So yep, I've been based back in Switzerland since start of 2019, and at the moment I work at Swiss Cycling, which is on a really, really cool project, which is something. They came to me asking if I would get this project started. They've got a 4-year project called Fast and Female, and it's a combination of grassroots sport and talent ID and talent development. So if people are based in the UK, it's a bit like the Breeze rides combined with Girls for Gold, if you can imagine. So, but the basic point of the project is to get more women into road cycling. So, I mean, it couldn't be more perfect, because, having started late myself, I know that it can be a bit challenging getting into cycling, man or woman, but given that there are more men in the sport, I think for some women who start, they look around and see only men on bikes and wonder how they fit in. And so we're working on trying to get more women into cycling, and then encouraging women to take
that's road cycling, is it? So is it more of a focus on the road?
Yeah, I mean, if someone comes on one of our rides on a mountain bike or an e-bike, that's great. We're not bikeist. There's no Velominati rules here, but the project is very much aimed at getting more women into road cycling, because the mountain biking scene is already super strong in Switzerland, probably because of people like Yolanda Neff, who are just amazing role models. And of course, part of the reason for this development project is that Switzerland has 2 road world championships within 5 years. So this year the world champs are in Martigny, in the French-speaking part of Switzerland, and then in 2024 they're in Zurich. So I think obviously the government wants cycling to put on a good show for home races, and so that's part of the reason for the talent ID and talent development part of the project. It's a lot to combine into one project, I have to say. It's not easy, because
it's a big scope.
Yeah, especially as I'm kind of the only person who's on the project full time. But it's cool, because so you could say that there's too much to do, and it's very easy to get the messaging wrong. So you've got to be really careful, because it's very easy to put off beginners with too much communication about elite sport, and there's a lot of perception problems, I think, especially for women in sport. They tend to judge themselves too harshly and be too modest, like, oh no, I can't keep up, they're all fast, they've all got swanky bikes and proper kit, and I've only got trainers and flat pedals, and so I'm not going to go on the ride. And we're trying really hard to communicate that everyone's welcome, and that everyone starts somewhere. The Swiss national champion Marlin Royce, she's national champion in road racing and time trial. She was 6th at Worlds last year in Yorkshire in terrible conditions, and she started racing, I think, 5 years ago, or riding 5 years ago, and she went from being terrified in a group ride to being 6th in the world, and that's and still improving. And I think that's what I want to show to beginners. Like everyone starts somewhere. Like everyone had to learn to ride and be in a bunch, and the improvement is fun. It's something that I understand as well, because I went through it too. And
well, I think everyone's gone for it, unless you start really young, which I'm sure is part of the project as well. I think why is road cycling so intimidating when you first rock up to a group ride? I think that's for the blokes as well as
yes,
women
it
as
is.
well. I think it's for everyone.
It's not just for women, but there is quite a macho culture on some rides, and it's not something that usually bothered me because I think I'm kind of stubborn, and so I can that's cuckoo clock. So I could put up with it, but I actually still remember. So I've got a good example here. When I first went on my very first group ride at Cambridge University, it was the University Cycling Club, and there was this guy there who was a few years below me, but he thought he was a really good cyclist. And he looked at me in kind of disdainfully, and he said something like, "Oh, you know, your socks don't match your gloves" or something. And I was like, "What? What on earth has that got to do with like?" I just want to go for a bike ride. And of course, like I think most of us cyclists, we also want to look good on a bike. There is quite a lot of emphasis on that and on the kind of the kit and the and that's, it's cool when you're good at it, but you've got to remember that the people who not just aren't good at it, but they don't have the resources, they either don't have the money to buy that kind of kit, or you know, maybe they just started cycling. You're not going to spend that much money on Rafa kit and fancy shoes.
First.
Yeah, you don't know, and then this elitism of how you look is what counts, and that really annoys me. Like it drives me nuts actually, because I think it's so wrong, and it's quite different from, say, running, where people often look really quite scruffy, even though they're very good runners. But you don't find that many really good cyclists who look scruffy. And I'm always delighted when you see someone on a really shit bike riding really well, because I think it's just it kind of makes a point. And I just think that, well, it just boils down to just be nice to other people, and especially if they're on the same group ride as you, just be nice to them and don't sneer at them because they haven't got Rafa kit and a Pinarello or something. And
the marketing, I mean, it's a simple rule in life, isn't it? You treat everyone as if you want to be treated yourself, how you want to be treated yourself. But why road cycling particularly? Because you don't really see that mountain biking, you don't get that vibe. Gravel now, I mean, maybe the diversification of cycling is the way that we're going to sort of knock these barriers down a bit, you know.
I really hope so. I really hope so. I went to my first sort of a bike packing race last year. It was a gravel race, let's call it that, but there wasn't much gravel. It was mostly rock and mud in the Pyrenees last year, called Further. And I was really nervous when I turned up because I'm a roadie who's turned to off-road ish stuff, and I was expecting the kind of reception you get at a road ride, and everyone was so friendly, and they were all different kinds of kit. There were people in merino t-shirts, there were people in full-on lycra. There was no one in a skin suit, but you know what I mean. There was no uniform, and I think the marketing is a little bit to blame in road cycling, but it's also it's a bit like a club. You know, once you're in it, you approve of the rules and the hurdles because you've made it, and I think there's a degree where people like to be a little bit elitist, and it's good to challenge yourself and be proud of your achievements in a sport, but doesn't mean you need to judge people on how they dress or what bike they ride. And
exactly. I think maybe because road cycling, there are so many teams and clubs, and it becomes almost tribal within
that's
little groups, and it becomes tribal within. Whereas with bike packing, because it's a sort of growing sport, you kind of the whole universe is the tribe, so you're all sort of connected together. So, I mean, I think one of the things I really want to do is try and, all clubs, barbecues and movements like that, where you're bringing cross tribes together and people really, because a lot of it, I think, is just you're worried that, that group over there, they're faster or stronger or whatever. Exactly. And actually, when you speak to them,
they're fine.
It's not the case. They're nice people.
Yeah, exactly. It's funny, but it's just when you're an outsider and you're new to a sport and new to a group, it can be quite intimidating. And and not everyone wants to put up with that. And that's why I think, certainly I've seen in Switzerland, we're trying to build a network of local group rides for this Fast and Female project, and we see way more women riding. Like, women's cycling is really exploding here in a good way. But lots of women ride on their own because club rides look a little bit too serious, and they just want to go out and have fun a bit. And now just to running, and that's totally cool. Like, you don't have to train at cycling to be a cyclist, and everyone who rides a bike is a cyclist. You don't have to train, you don't have to have a power meter, you don't have to wear lycra, and I mean, it sounds and then I worry that maybe I'm part of the problem in these things, because I put up pics on Instagram where I'm not going to choose the picture where I look totally shit. I'm trying to choose the picture where I look slightly less shit. And recently I've been trying to think about how I portray myself, and so I'm trying to put more of the kind of gritty pictures of like sitting on the pavement eating pizza and covered in filth, or when I've fallen off my bike and stuff, because when people see it's not all the sort of posy shots with like the perfect sunset and stuff. It's like cycling is mostly about getting hungry and filthy. Even road cycling.
I think you've opened a can of worms there that's far greater than cycling.
Yeah,
That's a society
this is true,
issue as a whole. You know, this whole like, this is my perfect Instagram life,
Oh,
and
God, yeah.
how often that's not often the case at the
No.
time. You know, no.
No.
So I just want to ask you a little bit more about, well, a couple of things, but bike packing has been. I kind of feel that you've almost gone full circle from sort of
Yes.
like cross country running,
Yes.
and now you're sort of finding that enjoyment on the bike.
Yeah.
Is this it? Is this your niche now?
Do you know what? I've decided I don't want to have a niche because it puts me in a pigeonhole. It puts me in the niche, and I love running, but I also obviously I love cycling. I also really like. I'm getting into bouldering. I'm terrible at it, and I like swimming, and I like hiking, and so what I don't race professionally anymore. I have a job. I only work 80%, I should add, but I have a job, and time is limited, and I want to do the fun things, and I want to do them with friends, or I want to set myself challenges, preferably both at the same time. And so what I do know is that I really enjoy the off-road riding, but I'm never going to be a downhill mountain biker. So I'm going to get myself a mountain bike at the end of this year or maybe next year. I'm really looking forward to that, and I want to go on a course and learn some skills because I want that challenge and I want to learn. But the off-road bike packing stuff I really enjoy, and I love so at home you can be spontaneous. So I just maybe decide when the weather's good to do a 2-day trip with friends, and you can pack the night before, and you can cook for yourselves on a mountaintop, and it is full circle because when I was a kid I wanted to be a mountaineer. I come from Norfolk, so there aren't very many mountains, and now I've gone sort of from running.
Pancake for anyone that doesn't know Norfolk.
Oh, well, come on, it's not Cambridge. It's not totally flat. We have Gas Hill, but it's still, it's basically flat. And I'm really lucky where I live. I'm in sort of pre-Alps, and so there's lots of not just big mountains, but there's also little back roads and the really old roads that are now gravel or broken up cobblestones, and just exploring those. It's genuinely it's just a hobby, but it also happens to be quite good training for an Everesting, it turns out. And I'm running a lot still, so my main aim was in terms of competition was to run mountain races and trail races. I'm on the Swiss Salmon team, and so all the races this year up to now have been cancelled because of COVID. I've got a race tomorrow, actually, my first race in quite a long time. And
a race tomorrow, having Everested 3 days ago.
Yeah, it's a mountain marathon with 3,000 meters of climbing. I might change the short course, I think, so one of the reasons I did go on Wednesday was that I knew that if I do a marathon, my legs will be wrecked for 2 weeks. So it was last week, or wait another month at least.
Not for a while.
And I wanted to just give it a crack. And that's what I mean. That's what I mean about being spontaneous. And when you're a pro athlete, you can't do this kind of shit. You plan.
No, of course.
I've still got the pro athlete like neuroses. Like I have an Excel table 6 months before the end, like from June onwards. I'm already planning next year's events. I wouldn't call them races, but like bike packing events or running races. And it's been really cool to be a bit more spontaneous this year, and having to be, and I've really enjoyed that. But I'm trying not to have too much of a niche. Like I just want to challenge myself. And I would say the only niche I do want to put myself in is a cookbook niche, I would say. So I started inventing recipes a few years ago, and got enough to fill a whole book, and so I want to get that out this year.
You can't keep it that short. You've got to tell everyone, because I was going to ask you next about this, because it's something I heard about when we met in 2017. Pocket Porridge, isn't it? Tell everyone about it.
So Pocket Porridge is the name I came up with, and it's kind of a cheesy name, but it perfectly describes what the thing is. So it's basically oatmeal-based cooked cake and snacks, and that sounds really boring, but they're really tasty, and I've got at least 35-40 different variations on the theme. So the first one I made was just plain, I'd call it porridge bread. So it's kind of like an oatmeal loaf, and it's kind of boring, but it's also really good food for riding. And then I started experimenting, and I made some carrot cake versions, and then I made chocolate peanut butter ones, and then I made lemon blueberry ones, and then I made jam-filled ones that were like donuts. And so I've ended up with loads of recipes, and I really love the inventing. I love testing them. So obviously I come up with an idea of like a concept of how the flavors would work together, and then you've got to work out how it works chemically. So it's got to be the right consistency, if it's too stodgy or too dry. And then I test it on my friends, which is great because they really love the free food on rides. and so basically I think it's a really really simple recipe, basic recipe, and you can adapt it hundreds of ways. So to some extent I don't see why anyone would buy a cookbook, because it's super easy, and I love inventing recipes, but I think a lot of people who like following recipes might find it useful. And like I said, it's delicious, and despite the fact that the ingredients are simple and it's really healthy stuff, most of them have got no added sugar, and there's no, a lot of healthy cooking, you have to sort of, it's a lot of effort. Like you've got to grate a sweet potato, or mash a cucumber or something, and oh god, it's just so much work. And I'm not into. I want it to be. Most people don't have enough time. So anyway, these recipes, I'm writing a book, and it's called Pocket Porridge because it's porridge that you can put in your pocket for rides, you see. So I thought that was a clever idea.
What's the plan with the book? you're starting to write it, and
Yes.
it's going to be recipes and a little bit of some stories
anecdotes.
and
Not
anecdotes.
not an autobiography, because I didn't want to write one of them, but autobiographical anecdotes that go with the recipes, because there's always a story about food, and I can always remember what I ate where, especially if it was good. So there'll be like lots of anecdotes from back in the day and more recent as well, and so it should be. I'm hoping it will be entertaining as well as useful, and I need a bit of motivation to make the time to write it. So so all my friends keep reminding me. I've been planning to write for 3 years or something. So
Awesome. Well, you have to let us know when that comes out, so we can push it out for you and make sure everyone's buying it. Excellent. Look, I know that you're slightly tight on time. I just wanted to ask you a couple more quick fire questions in terms of. Actually, I haven't mentioned Vietnam to you. You were there last year, weren't you, with David, who we've had on the podcast?
Yep.
Tell us about that.
That was
Great place to ride your bike.
Oh, it was an amazing trip. So I think it was January to February. So I just finished a GCN and I had some time off before the new job, and I'd been wanting. I've done a bit of riding in Taiwan because of the Taiwan KOM, and got a friend here who's into cyclocross who loves Vietnam. So I'd heard about Velo Vietnam through friends in Australia. Anyway, long story short, I got in touch with them, asked them for a route. They said, no, we'll do you a tour. Want to do some gravel? Awesome. And then it was just, David wasn't on the tour, but Ash, who also runs Velo Vietnam. It was just three of us, so me, my mate, and Ash, and
Brilliant.
It was brilliant. It was really hard, but also brilliant though. So I wanted to go and just ride my bike loads, and Ash and David insisted that we had a few days off in cultural places to look at temples and old fortresses and coffee plantations. And in advance I was like, no, I'm a cyclist, I want to go train. And the best days were the days off when Ash and David, they're so knowledgeable about the culture, and it's fascinating, and you learn about history and culture and amazing food, and just and looked after just the right amount. Like, we had some 5-star hotels, and we also had some places that were basically huts with no running water, and it was all cool. Like, I'm fine with camping, so it was a brilliant trip, and I'm hoping to go back this Christmas if the borders are open.
If you're allowed to get down there. Brilliant.
David's promised me an off-road Everesting, so we'll see.
Interesting.
Have you been there?
Yeah, he joined us a couple of weeks ago. I mean, the reason I set up Unfound is because, I love travel, but I love cycling, and I love everything you get from just the general experience of seeing new people, places, and meeting new people, and I think it gives you so much. And,
exactly.
Yeah, good times. Where's your favourite place? I'm sure you've cycled all around the world, but where? And you live in Switzerland, which is probably right up the top of the list. But where's your favourite place to ride your bike?
Yeah, here in Switzerland. Yeah, I mean, we haven't obviously. Most of the world hasn't been able to travel for a few months now, and I feel incredibly lucky that I'm here. Partly because we weren't locked down, we could ride and run just even when the virus was at its peak, but also just it's such a beautiful country, and it's so well looked after. And I'm in the process of trying to get Swiss citizenship. You can have dual citizenship, and I've been here for 15 years now, and I speak Swiss German, and I decided that I wanted to stay living here, so I hope I get citizenship. And the only sad thing is missing family obviously in the UK, but normally they'd be able to travel over here, or I could go there and see them. But in my favourite corner of Switzerland, there's just so many that are nice. There's some little dirt roads that lead to great viewpoints with barbecues, with sort of fireplaces where you can light a fire and toast bread and watch the sunset. Those are nice corners of here.
Magic. Well, that seems a pretty apt way to finish the chat. I know how busy you are. Thank you so much for taking the time. Huge congratulations on the Everesting. Stay in touch. Let us know when the book's out, won't you?
Yes, I will. Yeah, thanks so much for making the time. It's been really good to talk. I'm going to let you know about the book, and I will push it shamelessly. And if anyone listening wants to know more, I have a Pocket Porridge Instagram account, which has no recipes on it because I want you to buy the book, obviously. But you can see lots of tempting photos of bits of cake, basically, and you can see a bit more about the recipes there. So,
Brilliant. And we'll get your personal Instagram in there, and when we go live, your website would have been updated, so we'll have your website in the show notes as well.
Awesome.
And you can drop Emma a note if you've got any questions or anything like that.
Thanks so much, Jules.
You're a superstar. Thank you so much, Emma.
Been a pleasure. Thank you very much. Cheers. Bye.
Thanks for listening. Please subscribe to the podcast, and more importantly, don't forget to download the Unfound app and join cyclists from around the world on the hub. We'll see you on there.